The Royal Scots in the Changing World Order, the First and Second Gulf Wars, Bosnia, and the Royal Regiment of Scotland. While still based in Werl in Germany, Operation Banner in Northern Ireland continued with the West Belfast Emergency Tour of 1988 against the backdrop of the ongoing commitment to the British Army of the Rhine to counter the threat of invasion by the Soviet bloc. Although Soviet glasnost was developing, Germany remained divided until the Berlin Wall came down in November 1989, ending the Cold War and initiating the phased withdrawal of British and American forces from Germany. Disintegration of the former Yugoslavia commenced in 1990, and political upheaval in Moscow in 1991 hastened the breaking up of the Soviet Union. As this unfolded, the 1st Battalion was one of the first battalions to receive the new infantry combat vehicle Warrior. This was a new form of metal monster with much improved protection, mobility, and firepower. Despite these improvements, it would still be the rifle section it delivered who would close with the enemy. Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal, our Colonel-in-Chief, continued her by now regular visits, on one occasion while the battalion was converting to Warrior. It would not be long before the battalion would play a significant part in the Gulf to eject Iraqi forces from Kuwait, mounted in their Warriors and in a coalition of the willing, of the sort that would increasingly become as important as NATO. The end of the Cold War brought the prospect of a peace dividend to HM Treasury, as the 1st Armoured Division took to the field in the Gulf, with 2 as opposed to 3 brigades, only made possible by stripping 3rd Armoured Division in Germany. Furthermore, the 1st Battalion was to be one of the infantry regiments threatened with removal from the order of battle for defence savings at a time when stability was becoming increasingly tenuous in the Gulf, in the former Yugoslavia, and elsewhere. This increasing tempo, while Operation Banner continued in Northern Ireland, started to contribute to alarming overstretch. In August 1990, Saddam Hussein ordered the Iraqi army to invade Kuwait. A response from the free world was inevitable. Initially, the 1st Battalion was tasked to secure the German ports from where vehicles were being shipped out to Saudi Arabia, but soon started a regime of intensive training, both in barracks and at Saltau. In January 1991, the Royal Scots Battle Group included Sea Squadron the Lifeguards and was in Saudi Arabia, where rigorous training continued as part of Operation Granby, the UK element, the US-led coalition known as Desert Storm. On 15th of January, the United Nations deadline for Saddam's withdrawal from Kuwait passed, and preparations for the ground war intensified. Meanwhile, back in Werl, as they have always done when their menfolk have deployed on operations, the wives kept the home fires burning, entertaining the children and sending parcels to their husbands in theatre. On the 24th of February, the ground war commenced. Deception had convinced Saddam that the main attack would be through Kuwait. Instead, the 1st UK Armoured Division, with the Royal Scots Battle Group in 4 Brigade, hooked round from the west through the desert to the rear of the Iraqi army. The Royal Scots Battle Group objectives were brass and tungsten, but in the course of the night approach, orders were received first to attack bronze. Training paid off. The commanding officer issued new orders on a dark, rainy night with the threat of gas attack, and a UK convoy crossing the line of march, and the recce platoon already in contact with the enemy. By first light on the 26th of February, bronze had been secured, with enemy artillery pieces destroyed, bunkers cleared, and over 100 prisoners taken. At 0800 on the 26th, Brass, a larger and more complex objective, was attacked. Iraqi losses were substantial: 25 armoured personnel carriers, 6 tanks, 3 mortars, 6 air defence guns, and 1 artillery piece were destroyed, with more than 80 prisoners taken. Before midnight on the 26th of February, Tungsten, another complex position, was attacked with similar success. The Royal Scots battle group advanced towards the Kuwait-Basra highway, being ordered to stop on the 28th of February. Throughout, Lieutenant Colonel Ian Johnson flew on his Warrior, his commanding officer's pennant, the original regimental colour. He later recalled having great officers, the best soldiers, and in his pocket a message from the Princess Royal and a letter from his wife. The commanding officer's full account can be read on the website. The campaign medal, 2 military crosses, 1 military medal, and the battle honours Gulf 1991 and Wadi al Batten were awarded. Pipe Major Cornwall composed the tune Bronze, Brass and Tungsten. All were soon to protest angrily that government had identified them for disbandment or amalgamation. They said, "We've just won a war for them, and this is how they thank us." Operation Granby was followed by 4 more emergency tours in Northern Ireland, and 1 2-year resident tour. These were in Fermanagh, South Armagh and at Ballykelly. In addition, the battalion set aside their rifles and took up fire hoses during a fire service strike at home. Global stability became ever more tenuous. The disintegration of Yugoslavia prompted NATO intervention to prevent further loss of life, while the survival of Saddam Hussein was seen by US President Bush as unfinished business. Meanwhile, Her Majesty's government reduced defence spending, especially on the infantry. The Royal Scots and the King's Own Scottish Borderers were ordered to amalgamate, causing anger in both regiments and in Edinburgh, the Lothians and the Borders. Reprieve in 1993 brought much relief, which proved only temporary. Meanwhile, in the Territorial Army, the regiment was reduced to a single company, and all battalions lost their military bands, who acted also as medics in time of war. Commitments continued, overstretch increased, and retention and recruiting suffered. Recruiting was turned on and off, not by the Ministry of Defence, but by the Treasury, compounding the situation. No amount of challenging training nor an imaginative regimental recruiting could help. This led to the 1st Battalion being reinforced by other regiments for Operation Banner. In 1996, a company of Royal Gurkha Rifles, themselves victims of defence cuts, joined the 1st Battalion, the Royal Scots. Some manpower shortages were alleviated by Fijian servicemen in the Edinburgh Tattoo transferring to the Royal Scots under Commonwealth arrangements. They proved to be very good soldiers and added much flair to the battalion Rugby 15. However, the writing was on the wall that, among others, the Royal Scots would not survive unless fully recruited. Defence spending continued to be cut and operational capability reduced as a consequence. In April 2002, the battalion moved from Ballykelly to Dreghorn Barracks in Edinburgh, an absence from Edinburgh of 22 years and from Dreghorn of 53 years. It had been at Dreghorn that the 1st and 2nd Battalions amalgamated in 1949. By September, the battalion had deployed on NATO duties in Bosnia, where they rapidly established a firm presence in a delicate political situation where a hitherto light touch had allowed corrupt elements of government to conceal nefarious activities. Royal Scots searchers discovered large finds of weapons, ammunition and intelligence, including within the Bosnian Serb Parliament and Ministry of Defence, where computers were seized, providing evidence that convicted war criminals. Such operations required swift appreciation of complex situations, followed by rapid action, often by officers, non-commissioned officers, acting on their own initiative. One corporal was awarded an MBE and 2 officers received Queen's commendations for valuable service. Throughout, patrols provided reassurance. On return, the pace did not slacken. By November 2003, they had trained as firefighters, guarded the Queen at Balmoral, undertaken public duties and appeared in the tattoo, received new colours, and had earned a strong 7-a-side rugby reputation. By the time the battalion had returned from Bosnia in April 2003, a new coalition led by the United States and the United Kingdom had invaded Iraq in the belief that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction. In November 2003, the battalion joined the UK force around the southern city of Basra. On this occasion, they deployed with companies under command of other units in 20 Armour Brigade, while battalion headquarters joined the staff of the Multinational Division Southwest. Despite the protestations of the commanding officer that the battalion would be better employed as an intact battalion. Nevertheless, he was able to visit the companies regularly. All companies were busy from the outset. A Company supporting 26th Regiment Royal Artillery, C Company under command the Queen's Royal Hussars, and later in a Danish battle group, while Recce Company mentored the Iraqi police. In the first month alone, the Royal Scots dealt with more than 10 small arms and rocket attacks, IEDs were made safe, 3 gunmen were captured, and more than 70 arrests were made. This was to be the norm for the remainder of the tour. Back in Dreghorn in April 2004, there was a need to hone the battle procedure skills of officers returning to the battalion from posting elsewhere. Command post and field exercises were held into 2005, along with Royal Guard and public duties in the summers of both 2004 and 2005. The battalion was to return to Iraq in January 2006, but under very different circumstances. On the 21st of July 2004, the Secretary of State for Defence delivered a statement on the ongoing restructure of the Army, reducing the infantry from 40 to 36 regular battalions. The Scottish Division was likely to lose 2 of its 6 regular battalions. Meanwhile, 1st Battalion, the Royal Scots, was warned once more for Iraq from January to July 2005. On the 15th of December 2004, timed to minimise immediate criticism just as the House of Commons recessed for Christmas, it was announced that the Scottish Division would lose 1 battalion and merge into a new Royal Regiment of Scotland of 5 regular and 2 reserve battalions through the merger of the 1st Battalions of the Royal Scots and the King's Own Scottish Borderers. 1st Battalion, the Royal Scots, was then stood down from Iraq, but was warned for Northern Ireland from January to July 2006. However, Iraq and Afghanistan were assuming increasing priority, and in December 2005, as the nation focused on Christmas, the Royal Scots Less 1 Company was ordered to Iraq, to be based outside Basra with a company in Baghdad. Deployment was in early January 2006 and was followed by a busy tour. It was as if the government was saying 373 years unbroken service to the Crown, more than any other infantry regiment, 149 battle honours, and the distinction of being the Raw Regiment and standing at the right of the line now count for nothing. But just before we get rid of you, go to Iraq for one last time, where we desperately need your expertise, professionalism, and dedication to duty. The Regimental Council instructed a campaign to save not just the Royal Scots, but also in support of all 40 battalions, which were already desperately overstretched against existing operational commitments. We will continue to fight against any reduction in the infantry, but to do nothing that would damage the difficult job of uniting the Royal Scots and the King's Own Scottish Borderers harmoniously. Several events were planned and led by the Royal Scots campaign organisers, enthusiastically supported by the Regimental Association. Events with other regiments' associations were coordinated by the unlikely but most effective trio of a former RAF corporal, a Scots Guards sergeant, and a retired nurse. Rallies and parades were held in Dundee, Stirling, and Liverpool, where local regiments were also under threat, and in London with a parade from Marble Arch to Trafalgar Square. The most significant was in Edinburgh on Saturday the 18th of December 2004. The Royal Scots Association Pipe Band led a march of 3,500 supporters of the Save the Scottish Regiments campaign along Princes Street to a rally in Princes Street Gardens. The Royal Scots contingent of 800, by far the largest, was at the front, and Princes Street was packed with Christmas shoppers, all of whom applauded. Jenner's department store in Princes Street gave up window space for a display of exhibits from the Regimental Museum, and the Scotsman newspaper printed a special edition. On the 28th of March 2006, Regimental Day, while the 1st Battalion was deployed in operation in Iraq, and after 373 years of unbroken service to the Crown, the Royal Scots merged with the 5 other surviving regular and 2 territorial regiments of the Scottish Infantry to form the Royal Regiment of Scotland. Temporarily, the battalion was named the Royal Scots Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland, and the King's Own Scottish Borderers were renamed the King's Own Scottish Borderers Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland. That day, the Royal Scots paraded for the very last time under the regimental flag, wearing their Royal Scots cap badges. The regimental flag was lowered, the Royal Regiment of Scotland flag was raised, and all ranks replaced their Royal Scots cap badges with those of the Royal Regiment of Scotland. As the companies returned to their operational duties, the soldier who had lowered the Royal Scots flag apologised for shedding a tear. "I never knew my parents and grew up in an orphanage," he said. "The Royal Scots have been my family." Seldom has a government so callously disposed of a regiment it had deployed in operations. The exemplary leadership of officers and NCOs and the fortitude of the soldiers achieved success. The final colonel of the regiment joined the rebadging parade in Iraq, while his predecessor joined the party rebadging at Reghorn. On the 1st of August 2006, Minden Day, having returned from Iraq, the Royal Scots and King's Own Scottish Borderers Battalion became the Royal Scots Borderers, 1st Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland. Royal Scots Regimental Day and King's Own Scottish Borderers Minden Day are both celebrated by the new battalion. The 28th of March is celebrated as Formation Day of the new regiment to mark their inheritance from the Royal Scots as the senior infantry regiment in the British Army, standing at the right of the line. On the 26th of May 2006, one Scots paraded along Princes Street, behind its old Royal Scots colours and before Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal, now as Royal Colonel rather than Colonel-in-Chief. They were followed by the Regimental Association led by its pipe band, representatives from HMS Edinburgh, the Royal Gurkha Rifles, the Canadian, Scottish and Royal Newfoundland regiments, TA Company, now in 6 Scots, and members of our affiliated cadet forces. On the 9th of May 2007, Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal unveiled 2 plaques on the regimental monument in West Princes Street Gardens to mark our 373 years of independent service and emerging into the Royal Regiment of Scotland, and a plaque commemorating her own 23 years as Colonel-in-Chief. The final Gulf battle honours and places we had served laterally were also added. After a service of thanksgiving in our regimental kirk in the Canongate, the colours presented at Holyrood in 1980 were laid up in the Scottish National War Memorial in Edinburgh Castle. Early in 2012, the final Royal Scots colours, presented in 2003 by our then Colonel-in-Chief, along with those of 2nd Battalion, 52nd Lowland Volunteers, which she had presented in 1985, were laid up in the Canongate Kirk, with Her Royal Highness taking part in the ceremony. The golden thread represents the continuity of heritage passed forward by the antecedent regiments of the former Scottish Division to the Royal Regiment of Scotland. The Royal Scots golden thread is the royal title bestowed by King Charles II in 1686, Royal Regiment Blue in the Scots regimental colours, the motto Nemo Meum Puni Lacessit, Royal Scots battle honours on the Scots colours, standing in the place of honour at the right of the line, with precedence over all other line regiments, Thistle collar badges, Glengarry with dicing and blackcock feather, displays in the Royal Scots Museum for the Scots collection, membership of the Royal Scots Club, Royal Scots alliances and affiliations now carried forward by Scots. The 1 Scots drum major and pipers are dressed as Royal Scots, with bass and tenor drummers wearing Canadian Scottish cougar skins. Dumbarton's drums is played as 1 Scots colours are marched onto parade. Royal Scots silvers and pictures are in 1 Scots and 6 Scots messes. A Company 6 Scots is at Hebburn House, once home to the 7th 9th Royal Scots, and commemorating Sir John Hebburn, arguably the founding father of the Royal Regiment of Scotland, which was formed on the 28th of March 2006, 373 years to the day that Hebburn was ordered by King Charles I to raise a regiment of Scotsmen throughout the kingdom. The 28th of March, once celebrated annually by Royal Scots, has been adopted by the Royal Regiment of Scotland. In the febrile days of 2006, Lieutenant General Sir Robert Richardson, 30th Colonel of the regiment, gave the following advice. The Jock is second to none, and is admired throughout the world. Treasure the past, draw strength from it, but do not live in it. The old days are gone, never to return. Embrace the future. Both former Royal Scots and today's men in 1 and 6 Scots live up to it. Since 2006, 1 Scots has deployed with the International Coalition to Afghanistan, to the United Nations force in Cyprus, and to help control the Ebola epidemic in West Africa. 1 Scots is now a specialist infantry battalion delivering training to the forces of friendly governments in unstable countries of the developing world, especially where these may be challenged by extremism. A Company 6 Scots has provided individual reinforcements to 1 Scots and to other Scots battalions on operations, and continues to do so. For the Royal Scots, 4 regimental pillars remain: the Association, Benevolence, Museum and club. Benevolence for all Royal Scots and their dependents in need. The association is a focal point for all the Royal Scots, commemorating Royal Scots history and recruiting, especially for one of 6 Scots. The Royal Scots Club in Edinburgh is our principal war memorial. Its objectives are remembrance, rallying place, and a base for schemes to benefit the regiment. And the museum in Edinburgh Castle tells the story of 373 years unbroken Royal Scots service to the Crown.